very good morning. I'm Supriya Srivatsa. I'm a software engineer at Atlassian. Welcome to my slightly contentious talk, why we're writing a monolith and not a microservice. I'm going to start with defining these two big words first. So a microservice or a microservice-oriented architecture is one in which your software or application is composed of several different services. These services would typically talk to each other over a lightweight protocol, most often HTTP. A monolith, on the other hand, is when your software is composed of just one entity, so it's pretty self-contained. As a consequence of it being pretty self-contained, over a period of time, monoliths tend to get pretty monolithic, right? The Cambridge Dictionary, I'm going to quote the dictionary, says that a monolith is very large and hard to change. Are you sensing some discontent over there already? Yeah? Monoliths are perceived to be this really sad code base that nobody ever wants to work with. Does it really have to be that way? So my team at Atlassian, the marketplace team, we own a monolith which is about a decade old. And we've gotten to a point where nobody wants to touch it. Nobody wants anything to do with it. And if we have to touch it, we're super scared to do it. We're at a point where we're scared to make a change in the code base reliably, knowing it won't break anything else. And that is not a good place to be in. So if monoliths have such a bad ring to it, and if my team has already gone through the pain of this monolith and how we work with it, are we breaking down this monolith into another monolith? Is that right? Why are we doing that? So I'm going to talk about that today, and going back to software engineering first principles, right? We need abstraction, we need separation of concerns, decoupling, all of that. We need all of that, but it does not have to be over a network. We need abstraction, but it does not have to be over a network. Any point of interaction where you introduce a network tends to get suddenly unseemingly complex, and if you can avoid it, you should avoid it. Boundaries. So this seems like a really simple thing, but it's really hard. Boundaries are hard to define, and boundaries are not set in stone. In our giving an example from what I'm working on, so we've separated out app catalog information. You can think of this as, say, product catalog information in an e-commerce parlance, into a separate code base away from our original SAD monolith. And now when we had to separate out pricing-related information for these products into its, out of the original monolith because nobody wants to work on it, it was a real point of contention as to whether this should sit in a different service of its own. Should it be a microservice? Or should it sit along with the product catalog information? And after a lot of debate and discussions, we realized, and analyzing the usage patterns for this in our current monolith, we realized that if we were to build two different services for this, they would really just be talking to each other very often. And if you do that, you're just going to end up with really chatty services. Microservices that are built with boundaries that are poorly formed or boundaries that are prone to change just end up being really chatty microservices. And that's not a situation you want to get yourself into. We want to create a system where we define boundaries that as we best know it today, and giving it the space to evolve and grow as things change in future. Conway's law. So Conway's law defines that organizations that build systems, organizations that design systems tend to design systems that mimic the communication structures of their organization. Should your code bases mimic your organization structure? That's a good question, right? When we decided, so in my team, we're working on a pricing, the example that I just talked about. And we have a company, OKR, where we're migrating from one commerce platform to another commerce platform. So we have an internal team that's working on this for several months at an end for this migration to see the light at the tunnel. Now, this might not really be the case a couple of years down the line. Once this migration is done, do we really need a pricing team that works on this day in and day out, or is it just going to be some features and fixes here and there? Right? If we end up with a separate service that takes care of this just so that the team can have a service that they work on, this microservice is going to outlive everything else. Business priorities change, business requirements change, team structures and team organizations, the organization structure changes. But what outlives everything else is your code base and your service. And which is why we need to be really cognizant of how we design and architect our systems. We decided that we need our teams to take ownership of the domain that they're working on. But this domain does not have to be a service in itself. So we just broke down a monolith and built another monolith. Is that what we did? I'll talk about it a little bit more. So we had reasons for reliability and developer productivity. In addition to that, what we built now is a modular monolith. What does a modular monolith mean? So we were able to identify clearly defined domains, which we now call modules, within our monolith. So we want these domains or these modules to be the abstraction that we see in our code base. The abstraction that does not need to be over a network, but needs to be there is modules in our modular monolith. Business domains drive modules, and interactions between these modules happen via well-defined interfaces only. So if in future we were to find a well-defined, a need to scale our pricing module independently, right now we do not see independent scaling required, so we don't need a microservice. But if things were to change and we need, say, independent scaling, we will be easily able to extract this module out into its own microservice if the need were to arise, which is a lot easier than breaking out a monolith which is not well structured, and unspooning all of it is a real effort. Shaping code structure. So I think the biggest challenge we see with the original SAD monolith that I mentioned is a lack of structure. Monoliths that you hate are monoliths that lack structure. So it's very important that your monoliths are structured such that they have well-defined modules which speak to each other with clearly defined interfaces. And we can define boundaries as we best know today. When we introduce microservices that speak over networks, things are really hard to change. If boundaries are blurred, don't make microservices. Try to define domain-driven modules and do it as we best know today. Things are prone to change. We're looking to build our system and architect our system such that we can do what works for us best today. Business priorities will change. We do not want to guess the future, but we want to ensure that our systems are capable and ready to evolve for whatever the future holds. And modular monolith that we've been working on has been working great for us so far. And that's why we're writing a modular monolith, and not a bunch of microservices. Thank you.